Hi there, welcome along to another episode of the Transfer Talk podcast. Once again, Pete Graves is absent. I think he still might be celebrating. Yeah, probably celebrating. It was a positive day overall for Newcastle United, bar the ending of that game against Liverpool. I'm joined by ESPN Sam Tighe and the iPaper's Daniel Storey. We'll be discussing the latest transfer news and, of course, building towards deadline day, Tuesday, 1st of September at 11 p.m. Daniel, welcome along. A debut on the Transfer Talk podcast. Now, if everyone was looking at the opening fixtures of the season, everyone was making their predictions. You were probably at the game where the prediction was the only one that went right when Arsenal beat Coventry.
Yeah.
There was a lot of unpredictability for the rest of that weekend, wasn't there?
There was. I think there were teams who we know are well run, Brentford, Brighton, who prove that being well run and planning smart for a season can pay dividends on opening weekend, and maybe being in a position of complete flux, Aston Villa, Tottenham, maybe even Forest, means you are behind the eight ball and you will be punished, and that's exactly what happened.
Sam, how was your weekend?
Yeah, Daniel's just listing off all the games I went to this weekend. I feel like I saw the same game twice in a way. Saturday I went to Brentford versus Tottenham, and I watched a largely undisturbed home team whose name begins with B wipe the floor with a team who had a tumultuous summer of their own choosing, to be clear. And the following day I went down to Brighton and watched basically the same thing happen, except in Villa's perspective, that the tumult was not of their choosing. It was very much foisted upon them. Yeah, I watched Aston Villa play without 7 starters from last season and no recognised striker, and João Gomez had the worst debut I can remember, red carded, and got dispossessed inside his own box for a goal inside the first half an hour. So, that was good. That was a nice train journey home.
You've missed a trick there. Let's just do that again. You just need to pause for a few seconds after I ask you the question. So, how was your weekend?
Silence. Better?
Brilliant. Right, let's talk Manchester City, because they are bound to have a very, very busy final few days in this transfer window. They have agreed an £86 million deal with Lille for their Morocco international Ayyoub Bouaddi. It is 81.3 fixed plus 4.3 in performance-related add-ons. He has now become the most expensive teenage signing in Premier League history. Can you guess who was the previous holder, Sam or Daniel?
I was going to say, my immediate thought was Esteval, but there must be one in
between
between
guess,
that.
but it's not right.
It's Lenny Yoro.
You read the script, didn't you?
I sure did. It's Lenny Yoro. I mean, this has beaten that record by some distance, hasn't
it?
It
was 58.9 for Lenny Yoro.
Yeah.
And this is 86.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of money, but we will be talking about him very, very shortly. But Daniel, I just want to go into Enzo Maresca's team selection. Nico O'Reilly in the number 10 role. Mark Gahey playing holding midfield. Was this an example of Manchester City need to recruit, or maybe a thinly veiled message from Enzo Maresca telling the board, look what we've got, look what I've had to do?
If it was a thinly veiled message, it's quite a bold play, right? On your managerial league debut at a super club, in a job in which most neutral observers would say you're fairly fortunate perhaps to get the job, to start throwing shade at owners for not backing them properly strikes as an interesting move.
City's owners are not exactly shy.
No,
it's
exactly.
never really been a problem. So
I think it was you thought the last guy could overthink formations. You haven't seen nothing yet. I mean,
in fairness, Gahey was good.
Yeah, he was kind of the defining player of the game, right?
Yeah.
He missed a sitter. He scored the goal. I don't think he's got the passing range to play as a 6. I think it'll be a temporary solution. But it was really, it was interesting to see so much flux rather than just maybe let's try and control the controllables a bit. There's so much change here. Why don't we change everything and see how the players cope with that? Bouaddi is clearly going to walk into that midfield. Has to for the fee. It does strike me as I think we all agree that this could be a transition season for City, and it strikes me as a transition signing, maybe.
yeah.
Daniel says that he's going to walk straight into the team.
Yeah.
He's an 18-year-old
Yeah.
at Manchester City, having to fill big boots in that team. Does he walk straight in?
Well, yeah, I mean, he basically has to, because they've said goodbye to the vast majority of their midfield this summer, right? Rodri is gone, Bernardo is gone, Reinders is gone, Nico Gonzalez is going, might be gone by the time you listen to this. I mean, at some point you're going to have to field someone in midfield, and Ayyoub Bouaddi is not a normal 18-year-old. He's got like 100 senior appearances to his name. He's played in the Champions League. He's played in the Europa League. He's played against Real Madrid. He's got 8 caps for Morocco, and he has bossed a World Cup. We are not looking at a starlet here and thinking, he's full of promise. We're talking about one of the very best young midfielders on the planet, and someone who, if things go their way, and they probably will become one of the best midfielders overall. So I don't see an issue with Ayyoub Bouaddi walking into this team and taking up a place in this midfield. Not only do they have to do it, but I think he's ready.
Do you think it takes a bit of pressure off Elliot Anderson? The price tag is there for £116 million. A lot of people have said it's going to be much easier for Anderson had Rodri stayed. But in a way, when a young player comes in for that much money, does he almost assume more responsibility, and will that help him?
There's definitely an argument for that, because at Forest, Elliot Anderson was the kind of all-action midfielder, and he is tactically going to have to get used to not needing to be that guy. Just the sheer possession that City will have, it wasn't the amount of work that Rodri did, it was the fact that he was always in the right place at the right time when the work needed doing, and that's something that Anderson is going to have to learn. At Forest, he was a firefighting midfielder. He was everywhere. He doesn't have to do that. If part of that role is guiding an 18-year-old through that, fine. But to Sam's point, I'm not sure Bouaddi is that far behind Anderson in terms of player development. There's an element of them both learning off each other here, I think. Anderson having to learn a new role, Bouaddi having to learn a new league. If that is the combination, there are so many unknowns in it that I don't think either of them can quite really know yet how that's going to pan out.
Go on, Sam.
No, I was going to say, absolutely. And we sat here last week, and Pete was asking us, like, so, Bouaddi and Anderson, and let's throw Enzo Fernandez in there, Sam. What do you think? And I'm like, it's a whole, there's 3 new players. Like, it's incredible that City are undergoing such a transformation. You called it a transformation season. I mean, elite clubs don't usually go through this level of turmoil, specifically in one position, but generally anyway in their squad. City are they're just saying goodbye to just about everybody off the back of Pep Guardiola himself as well. It's incredible to see. And you wonder how long the sort of Pep stardust will last on the team, because there'll be some automatisms in this team where they'll just do what they have to do. But the longer it goes on through the season, the more that will wear off, and Maresca will imprint on the team more. What will it look like in November? Absolutely no idea.
If it is just to be Bouaddi, just say, for example, that's the only addition that they make from now till the end of the transfer window, is that strong enough to push Arsenal in the title race?
I think that's a stretch. I think if I have to pick between the two, I would take the stable Arsenal unit, who haven't lost anybody, were the best unit in the league last season anyway, and have added Bruno Guimaraes, to the unknown of whatever City are going to be. And also, let's just rope in the fact again that they're changing manager away from one of the greatest, possibly the greatest manager of all time, into somebody else. So I think you'd be pretty bold to say that City are closing the gap on Arsenal and saying that definitively.
What do you reckon?
Yeah, I have City closer to third than I do to first at the moment. I think there is a clear argument that Arsenal could not improve and still win the league by more points than they did last season. And even with the rotation that Arteta will have to do this season that he didn't do last season, I just don't see City getting particularly close. I think there were obvious frailties in their game that midfield, even with Bouaddi in, can be exposed to counter-attacking, can be exposed to those teams like Brentford and Bournemouth and Brighton that just soak up the pressure and then hit you.
You touched on it there about another potential arrival. I mean, it's up in the air at the moment. Enzo Fernandez was on the bench.
Thought they missed the deadline, Doms. Thought they missed that 5 p.m. deadline.
Yes. Yeah, everyone believes that one. Comes on, booed.
Yeah.
Probably partly to do with Argentina and
of course
how he's disliked, but also maybe from some of the Chelsea fans as well, because he was definitely booed pre-season.
He was booed in
by some of the Chelsea fans. How do you see this one panning out? And is there almost an inevitability that at some point it will happen? Because it's clear that Manchester City want him. It's clear he wants to go to Manchester City. Chelsea are in a bit of a sticky situation. They've effectively put that deadline in because they wanted to get that price out there. They want to sell him, but they want to sell him for £120 million. They know it's a one-horse race, effectively. No one else is actually going for him. They can't create any kind of bidding war for Enzo Fernandez. Has it gone that far to the point of no return, even though he did come on yesterday?
Look, I mean, Enzo, I think, is in an untenable situation at Chelsea at this point. Yes, some of the boos are to do with Argentina and the World Cup. Some of them are to do with the fact that he spent the second half of last season telling anybody who would listen that he would quite like to leave. Fans do not take
Real Madrid
kindly.
As well.
Yeah, I mean, they don't take kindly to that sort of thing, which is completely fair enough. So why would you want to watch Enzo play for your club if he doesn't want to play for your club? So that's why it feels untenable, and he has to go somewhere. Maresca obviously loves Enzo, and Enzo reciprocates that. So it seems like the obvious choice. I'm still not convinced that City need to do that deal. I don't think he should play that deep in midfield for that team. And I think if he plays a bit further up, you're starting to impinge on the playing time of Phil Foden, who needs a big season. You're starting to limit Ryan Cherki and his ability to impact games. Obviously, big teams need big squads. They play a lot of games, but it's just not a deal I would do. That doesn't change the fact that I fully expect it to happen at this point, because I think everybody is just going to make it happen, and City do have the money to make it happen.
There's a Chelsea ego thing here as well, because having put that fee out there, I'm sure that was a starting point. We know that the deadline was the deadline, and if City now bid 120 million, the deal will get done. But City are not going to bid 120 million pounds. Why would you, if you know that, as Sam says, that his position at Chelsea feels quite untenable?
They've given City a few cards by doing this, haven't they?
Yeah, and it's how far they're prepared to swallow their ego. If I'm Manchester City, I make a bid of roughly similar to what the Bouaddi bid and say, well, okay, what about 85 million? Let's start there. And Chelsea may laugh that off, but if the alternative is having Enzo on the bench all season and nobody quite being happy with him there, then at some point they're going to have to say, yeah, we need to do a deal here. I'll be fascinated to know what that price is, because like Sam, I expect it to happen, and I don't particularly think it will work. I mean, even as a kind of roaming Bernardo Silva replacement, maybe, but then, yeah, I want to see Ryan Cherki do that sort of stuff. I don't want to see Enzo doing it.
4 words: performance-related add-ons. That could be a big factor in any kind of deal for Enzo Fernandez. 70 million initial with 80 million in add-ons.
Have we seen?
And Chelsea will say it's 150.
Well, if he hits the markers, it very much is.
3 Ballon d'Ors in a row. It seems unlikely.
Yeah, I mean, Chelsea, this is the problem with some of the issue with their long contracts, right? Is they've paid £105 million for Enzo Fernandez, and because he's on such a long deal, the book value of this player is still so high that they need to. They can't really countenance the idea of selling him for anything less than 100 million. Otherwise, it looks bad on the books, despite the fact that he's been there for like 3.5 years. And going for 80 or 90 million on paper sounds really good. It's still bad for them because his fee has been amortized over 150 million years, and it means that they can't shake it off the books. So they have created a bit of a problem for themselves here. And I don't think they can really sell for anything less than 100 million base fee without it looking quite bad on the books. Although it will look good on paper, it will not help them. So that is why they're setting that stall out really high.
Right. I mean, let's see what happens with Enzo Fernandez in this final week. But one deal that does look like it's going to happen is the Palmeiras winger, Allan. City have reached an agreement for £34 million all in, including performance-related add-ons. What kind of player are they getting? Is he going to, like we're saying about Bouaddi, walk straight into the team? Does this guy?
Probably not. Look, my knowledge of Allan is limited, but I did speak to his former youth coach. He used to run the Palmeiras Academy yesterday just to get a bit of an insight on him, and he thinks he's fantastic. And this is a fee. It doesn't look like very much to City, but this is Palmeiras' third biggest sale ever, behind Endrick and Esteval. So that places him right in range with some very, very talented players. Allan is going to go ahead and take Savinho's spot in the squad. And he's effectively cost what Savinho cost them when he moved over from Girona. So to me, this is a smart movement from Manchester City. Okay, Savinho's going to have to go. It's going to go for a high price. We'll get into that in a moment. They replace on a much cheaper level with a very good young Brazilian player. Palmeiras is best, according to those I've spoken to, and a really versatile player too. Both wings, 10, and the coach I spoke to thought even possibly as a number 8, moving from deeper as well. It's a big fan.
So it looks like a positive signing for City. What have you made, just before we carry on with some of the other specific deals of their window so far?
It feels like transition and transformation by design. It feels to me, with Guardiola leaving, they had 2 options. You either go for, right, we try and control all of the other controllables and keep the unit in place, or we go for the sticking plaster approach, which is, if Guardiola's going to leave, this is the summer to make everything change, which is kind of like what Villa have done, right? If we're going to lose one cog, let's just change the machine entirely. So Rodri goes, so Bernardo Silva goes, so John Stones leaves. So there is so much change there. If you'd have looked at the team that played on Sunday 18 months ago, you'd kind of not believed how we'd have got to this stage, not least because Elliot Anderson was a £116 million player in midfield. I'm not sure that the club as a whole and the fan base, I don't know if they're ready after so much sustained success for a wait and see season. They're really hard. A season is a heck of a long time when you're being told it's the next one that matters. So just how you deal with that is going to be absolutely fascinating. And also how young players in that system can become a little bit, have their reputations tainted. They sort of end up chasing their tail to make a mark on the first team.
So Rodri gone, Reinders gone. There could be another one on the way as well, Nico Gonzalez. Newcastle United in advanced talks. The value is around £50 million. I can't remember what you said when he actually joined, but you're surprised it hasn't really worked out for him. And what will he bring to Newcastle's midfield? Because Newcastle have got a Bruno Guimaraes and a Sandro Tonali hole waiting to be filled. Which one does he fill?
Yeah, I think Nico Gonzalez's Manchester City career was very confusing. Very confusing. Clearly a good player. And Pep Guardiola would play him like 7 games in a row and then just send him into the dungeon for 3 months and we'd never see him. And then he'd bring him back in again and then he'd take him out again and we wouldn't see him. I found it really, really strange the way he blew so hot and cold on this player. And I guess in the end, I remember Pep is quite open when he talks about these players, right, and what they need to do to improve. He's more open than most managers. And a couple of interviews he did after games, one was he said that Nico Gonzalez moves around too much for a holding midfielder. So he wants him to be a bit more static. And I think that's his way of saying he wants him to be in the right place at the right time and maybe not get ahead of the ball too much. In another interview later, he talked about how he basically just wasn't brave enough on the ball. So apparently, according to Pep, he's got bad positioning and bad passing, which I suppose is why he'd never quite found his way into the team full time. But don't get me wrong, I think Nico Gonzalez is a fine player. Absolutely top half Premier League standard. And for 47.5 million rising to 50, in a market that has threatened to get completely out of control on centre mids at points this summer, I think this is a really nice deal for Newcastle United. And he's better off the ball than he is on the ball. Fine. But they've just appointed a coach who wants to play vertical pressing football. That's fine. Nico is a great signing for Newcastle, in my opinion.
Talking about the market going out of control leads us very nicely to Savinho. Spurs have agreed that deal, £75 million plus £10 million in add-ons. Crazily, it's a record sale for Manchester City. Who would have thought that it would have been Savinho in a summer where Rodri has left the football club as well? Didn't really get a regular spot in that team. Maybe a silly question, but are you surprised the price he's gone at?
Yep. Can you ask Daniel this one?
Well, I can do the same. Yeah.
Look, when a club signs a player for £30 million and they don't do very well, they score 2 goals in 2 years in the Premier League, I would expect that player's value to go down. It's almost tripled. So well done to City. I don't know how they've done this. Like, well done, because this is an amazing, amazing figure to get to. And I have big questions of Tottenham Hotspur and their spending here.
They are a club who over the last, pick a number between 1 and 15 years, have become sort of medically addicted to signing attackers who you think, do you know what, that could really work at half the price. So Dominic Solanke, Richarlison, Matthias Tell, Odegaard, like there's something in all of them. And if you kind of fuse them all into one forward, you'd be like, this is the guy. The problem is you can't start 6 of them at the same time. And yeah, I don't get it at all. They are crying out for a really, really good number 9. And what they seem to think is if you add enough other players, maybe somehow it'll all work out.
They are crying out for a winger as well, of course, with the injuries they've got to Kudus and to Kulusevski. They do need wingers.
They need one who can beat a man and cross the ball effectively, right? Which we haven't seen from Savinho at all.
I think Savinho could beat the man. It's the next bit maybe that's the problem. We're not really talking about any of his positives here. Like he is, like somewhere in there's a good player, right? It was great for Girona 2 years ago, but the further we get away from that, the more questions that arise. And I wouldn't be comfortable spending this much money on the player, even if I think deep down there's a player in there, because he hasn't worked. It's been 2 years since I've seen him play particularly well. 2 years since he's been a particularly important member of a team. So to get to this figure is it's a massive surprise.
Let's look at Spurs spending so far, because it has been an absolutely huge outlay, as Daniel mentioned there. Omar Marmoush is expected to come as well. It's an initial loan, but there's a £50 million clause inserted in that one. Savinho, we've just mentioned, it could rise to £85 million. It's £185 million combined for Sandro Tonali and Matheus Fernandez. £52 million for Jan-Paul van Hecke, who had a year left on his contract. 320 million once the Savinho deal goes through, and the Omar Marmoush, if it does get to that option price in the summer. Add to that Marco Senesi. These seemed a little bit more wiser deals, didn't they? Senesi, Andy Robertson, Dubravka, they're all on free transfers. Of all of those players...
But they're going to be on big wages because they're free transfers and they're premium players.
But of all of those players, who would Spurs fans be most excited about, should they be?
Probably Matheus Fernandez, just because of the untapped potential. I don't think 85 million is a great fee for him at the moment. I think it's still an overpay. It's the theme of the summer for Spurs, but I think it's a bit of an overpay. However, if over the next couple of years he really fulfills his potential, we may be able to look back on that deal and say that it was worth it, because Matheus Fernandez could still be just about anything. I think as a midfielder, I think you could mould him into pretty much anything. And I think there's a really, really good player in there. With some of the others, I'm less hot on. Someone like Tonali, who I think we all know what Tonali is. He's not going to change. Is he worth 100? No. It's an overspend, sure. At least with Matheus, you've got the idea of like this could be a very special player. They need to play their cards right. They need to develop him very well in the next couple of years. So he's the one that I would be the most excited by.
The overpay is sort of by design, right? Tottenham finished 17th the last 2 seasons. They made a decision internally that they wanted to get players in quickly and they didn't want to get involved in messy sagas. So they went in at a price point where, e.g. Manchester United said, okay, that's fine, that's not for us. And that's how they got it done, because De Zerbi effectively been given the keys to the club and he wants them in, and he wants them in quickly. The problem with that is we all know we can all see the fees, and they do create an expectation of a £100 million player or an £85 million player, and you just can't see the value for money in that. Now, maybe to an extent with Spurs this summer, it's monopoly money because they've not spent before and there's money to spend, and my goodness, they need to improve quickly. Doesn't stop it being an overpay, does it?
It won't stop anyone in 2 years' time looking back on it if the deal doesn't work out and not criticising it, because that context is all irrelevant in 2 years' time when we look back and go, well, that was a waste of money. If that's what happens, that context is completely lost. And it's still money they spent. It's money they could have spent elsewhere. It's money they could have spent more smartly. So, yeah, they needed to improve. Yeah, they needed to go quickly. They backed themselves into a bit of a corner, I would say, in terms of getting into the market early, because they made those statements and said this won't happen again. You can't then let the market drift away from you for 6 weeks. I get it. But I'll always be an advocate for spending smartly. And I'm not totally convinced they've done that in at least half of the cases here.
My other concern is Spurs, more than any other Premier League club, I think, need a quick start to this season in terms of shifting the mood, proving that the De Zerbi thing was not just effectively an interim effect last season after Tudor. And they have probably, on occasion this season, they're going to play a completely new centre-back pairing, a completely new central midfield pairing, and potentially a new striker and winger combination.
Well, the defensive line defensive line I watched on Saturday was 3 new players and Archie Gray at right back. And as a combination, as a 4, they had never played together.
Yeah,
That's a lot of change.
Yeah.
And then got to after the game, and De Zerbi said that, well, last week I knew that we were in a bad position. Last week I knew we'd lose this game. He also said that he knew Lucas Bergvall would have a difficult game. And I'm just like, yeah, okay.
That'll do wonders for
the
his
manager,
price, won't it?
the manager who can see everything coming but doesn't actually do anything to change it.
It was very strange.
Let's go back to just another potential City exit, Daniel. Jack Grealish actually came back and played against Bournemouth on Sunday afternoon.
And the Community Shield. Got on.
Yeah. And after the game, though, Maresca said we'll have to wait and see with regard to his future. Do you feel it is, in the last week, he will get a move away from Manchester City? And what do you think his best option would be?
Yeah, I mean, I think he is absolutely one of those who's there until other people are. And then suddenly his position in that squad becomes pretty much untenable. The wages are an issue. They have to be an issue in terms of him getting the move he wants. The move back to Villa on loan with an option or obligation makes sense in all our minds, but Villa's wage bill is large and there's conversations to be had about how much they contribute, and it's not easy.
I don't think so. It's a maximum 2 domestic loans, isn't it, for Premier League clubs, and they've used up the slots, Garnacho and Wan-Bissaka. So I don't think Villa can loan him unless I've misread the rules or they've changed them, but I don't think it's on the table. So for Villa it would need to be
they're getting scuppered at every turn, aren't they?
It would need to be a situation where they actually sign him permanently, and that's so much more complicated.
Yeah.
Because then you've got to work in not only the wage reduction but also the transfer fees and all sorts. And also, the question of would Jack Grealish want to go back to Aston Villa? That's a very fair question because approximately half the fan base turned their backs on him when he left, and his family have received, I think, some abuse as well. So it's not a given that Jack Grealish wants to return at all.
In terms of other options, Yasla's vertical football, Grealish would be quite fun on the left-hand side of that Newcastle team.
Yeah,
I think,
he
on
would.
the break. That kind of jumps out as a deal that could look. I think we all know that Grealish probably wants to stay in England. I think he's probably more comfortable doing that. He had fun at Everton until the injury, but that's gone pretty quiet in terms of them renewing that interest. He's going to be one of those.
I think they'd like to have him back. I just think they're all looking at the figures like we are and going.
Last 48 hours is going to be Grealish is basically going to find out his next 2 years, isn't he? Which is,
Okay, Sam, let's get to Aston Villa then. Silence again. Wasn't a good start to the season. Tumultuous summer continuing.
Yep.
As well. You spoke about, Daniel, I don't know whether hopefully you listened to the Transfer Talk podcast, but Sam has been having nightmares now about.
Oh, you heard about those, did you?
I'm
aware of Sam's summer. Yeah,
he often texts me actually during the week with a tweet that's saying, "Oh, Ollie Watkins," when he's just like, "What am I supposed to do?" With a choice range of emojis, I must add. It looks like he'll be the latest player to leave Villa Park. You were there for the game at Brighton. What was the feeling you were getting? Because publicly, it feels like the club are apportioning the blame towards Ollie Watkins. This is all of his doing. He didn't want to play without saying publicly he didn't want to play.
Yeah, I think it's very fair to say that the club feel like they were let down by Ollie Watkins at the weekend. Villa turned up to Brighton without a striker. And now this, to a point, this is quite unfortunate because how often do you get a scenario where, especially for the first game of the season, all of your strikers are unavailable? And Villa have 3. So Tammy Abraham limped off in the final pre-season game. Brian Maggio scored in the Super Cup, got injured until September. And Watkins is in a protracted transfer saga with Al Hilal and seemingly took himself out of the running to play. So Villa, for the first game of the season, turned up with Emi Buendia up front. And it goes exactly as badly as you would think it would. So Villa are obviously upset with the summer, how the season has started, the shape that they're in coming into the season. And I guess after 6 years of Ollie Watkins, and I'll make the point, for most of last season, Ollie Watkins was bad. He was really bad. It was only in March, when he got left out of the England squad, that he really perked up. For the majority of the campaign, he was in very poor form, and Emery played him every single game. So there's always give and take between players and clubs and players and managers, and there's a distinct chance that Emery thought that Ollie Watkins owed him a game there. But we know how these things go. We know that when transfers are in the mix, often players are taken out of the situation because an injury could scupper something. Ollie Watkins wants to go to Al Hilal. He's made that very clear this summer. There's an offer. Villa have rejected 4 bids. But look, while that was obviously the main storyline of Sunday, let's not completely and utterly focus on that and completely absolve Pau Torres for the worst game he's ever had in a Villa shirt, João Gomez for the worst debut in the Premier League I've ever seen. He dispossessed in his own penalty box for a goal and then red carded within half an hour. Like, there are other things at play here, right? But Watkins, I get the impression, is going to leave. Villa have offered him a new deal, but I think he's going to go in the next week or so.
You would have, I mean, we keep quoting Unai Emery in his comments. Did that point towards frustration at Ollie Watkins or frustration at the predicament that Villa find themselves in, having to sell all their players? Because we had a graphic up on Sky Sports News that showed the Europa League final winning team.
Yeah.
And it's been absolutely dismantled.
It has some of that at the behest of Unai Emery.
Mm-hmm.
He has made it quite clear that if this is going to happen, it's kind of going to be on his terms as much as possible. He's going to be allowed to choose how this rebuild happens. He is the only thing, I think, that's stopping fans from all-out panic after Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was really interesting. I did a piece last week in which, reflecting the fans' thoughts, normally it's the fans of the club who panic first. Actually, with Villa, it's the opposite. There's all this external noise about, oh, God, you're losing all your players. And Villa fans are like, we still got Unai Emery and we trust him. Don't worry, it's fine. Clearly, there's a fragility to that. And if you keep getting beaten, then that becomes a problem. But I think his frustration on Sunday was at the abysmal performance, firstly. And yes, there was an element of bringing Watkins into that and that becoming the focus of a very easy focus of it. I suspect he was more annoyed about the defensive line. I suspect he was more annoyed about the constant losing of possession, 30 yards from their own goal. They looked abysmal in their own half. They're the things that annoy managers in the 10, 15 minutes after a game, I think, more than we haven't got the players and I wanted.
Yeah, you could tell he was frustrated. I saw a post from someone on X where they'd said that Fabian Herzl had missed the 0.5 second window to shake hands with Unai Emery.
Yeah, he was straight down the tunnel, wasn't he? Yeah, he was
tunnel.
annoyed. Look, Daniel, just to build on your point there, the reason the fans are more calm than you would expect them to be is because this happened last year.
Yeah,
it's the same thing. Like I was debating with a couple of my friends. Was Sunday worse than the 3-0 home loss to Crystal Palace the day before deadline day last summer, or was it slightly better? And the fact that we've got two comparables within 12 months of each other really does paint the picture of how common this feels at Aston Villa. Until the transfer window shuts, Villa can't really function properly. Also happened in January, right? January was abysmal. And Unai basically told us on Sunday that he wishes the transfer window never opened in the first place. He just wants to coach players and play games. He doesn't like any of this. And Villa are in a very strange and unique predicament where they are hamstrung by transfer windows. They can't make moves without knowing exactly what's going to happen. They have to be reactive. Basically, for the last 12 months, every single player at the club has been more or less for sale at the right price. And it creates so much uncertainty in the ranks. Of course, it affects the players while the window is open.
And there's also a psychological element for supporters in that you've climbed the mountain, right? You've ended the trophy drought. You've won the European trophy. You've qualified for the Champions League again. So if there is a time to have a bit of faith and just see what happens, this is it. This is like the easiest transition season sell in history, right?
Pretty much, yeah. There's only going to be 3 stands at Villa Park next season, so don't expect more than 75% performance from anybody, you know? It is genuinely one of those proper resets. You know, 7 first-team players from last season not involved at the weekend for various reasons. Most of them obviously gone. Onana injured, etc. 7 players.
Just on Watkins, though, Daniel, it's Al Hilal who are pushing. Sam mentioned 4 bids already knocked back. Are you surprised there's no Premier League club involved in the bidding for Ollie Watkins?
Yeah, if I'm turning back time, I'm trying to shake Tottenham Hotspur and saying you don't need Savinho and Marmoush. Why don't you just go and bid £60 million for Ollie Watkins and see what he could do as a number 9 for you with all these attacking midfielders? It's a move I would have liked. Watkins has slightly fallen between eras of that big move, right? There was the Arsenal chat. It reminds me a bit of Jamie Vardy, actually, in that there was this kind of big link to Arsenal. It was like, this is the move he's finally going to get. And it just never happened. And then his career just sort of plateaued a little bit. When that happens to players now, the Saudi Pro League becomes the option in terms of earning potential. He has also seen, and I think this is relevant, he's seen Ivan Toney get into a World Cup squad playing in that league, and he thinks, well, it doesn't even mean my international career is over because there's not many other options other than Harry Kane. So I'm slightly disappointed in it from a enjoying watching Ollie Watkins score goals perspective, but I can see why he wants it.
Let's get to some good news for Aston Villa, because there is some.
There is.
Well, hopefully for Villa fans, you'll say this is good news. Leon Goretzka looks like he's on his way to Villa Park. Is that an exciting addition for you?
Yeah, I mean, as long as the figures are right. Leon Goretzka has got a quite the reputation. He was at one stage one of the best box-to-box midfielders in the world. Has played basically his entire top-level career at Bayern Munich. These players don't tend to come too cheap. I know that Goretzka has passed his best. Exactly where he is, I don't know, but I know he's not at his top level. So as long as these numbers make sense, we're talking 2-year deal, don't give him 150 grand a week, that sort of, because these are the contracts that put Villa in all of these problems in the first place, right? So you can't spend a whole summer digging yourself out of the hole only to then just jump back into the hole. So as long as the figures
it's worth watching though.
as long as the figures
This was a positive question.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, therapy continues.
As long as the figures make sense, fine. Also, at a time of such change, an experienced head like this, very smart addition, and you need something to replace Onana short term because he's out for basically the whole season with an ACL tear. FIFA have to pay Villa about £6.5 million for the Onana injury. So if that's Goretzka's wages, it's like a literal free transfer. So fine.
My only doubt is I think 2016-17 was the last time he started more than 25 league games in a season. Now I know the Bundesliga is a 34-game season, but there are muscle injury histories there.
Sure, yeah.
Aston Villa plus.
Yeah, he's
muscle
30 and he's 31 as well. So
yeah,
but I'm sure that he's not. He's not a. I don't think he's coming in as you play every single game.
No.
I don't think he's a workhorse player. So and you need the squad, of course. It strikes me as the kind of player who will light up a Champions League night and be reasonable in the Premier League.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to a genuinely positive story then. Well, I'm hoping this is going to be.
I could surprise you yet.
Yeah. Rafael Leao, Sky Italy are reporting that the club have approached Milan for the player. This one excites you, doesn't it?
Yeah, this discussion was happening late last night to see if it can work with Jorge Mendes, the super agent, involved, as he has been for a few of Aston Villa's transfers this summer and previously. Leao needs a new club, so they're working to try and find him a solution. It's a potentially very exciting signing. Leao's big problem over the years, bear in mind 4 years ago, he was one of the best left wingers in the game and has since been usurped by Kvara and all sorts of Vinny and all sorts of players. His big problem was that he didn't do the pressing work and the defensive work, and he never really stepped on because he wasn't willing to do that part of the game. Well, good news, Unai Emery's Villa don't really press. So if you can take a player like that and not really ask a lot of them off the ball, Unai can then make his on-the-ball qualities really sing. And he is a really special player. So it could be a good match. However, let's not kid ourselves. This is a ridiculously complicated deal to happen. You thought Grealish might be difficult. Leao, the figures, the money, the agency, all of it, it would be really difficult.
Yeah, Sam, you mentioned that was one that broke last night. Well, one that's developing as we record this Transfer Talk podcast is Aston Villa's interest in the Crystal Palace forward, Jean-Philippe Mateta. There's been initial contact. Your thoughts on that one?
Or who hasn't bid for Jean-Philippe Mateta in the last 6 months? Forest have put a bid in at some point, didn't they, in January? AC Milan failed a medical. Now Villa, he's taken the club to court over the last year of his contract, arguing it's invalid. So, this sounds very healthy as a situation. What can I say? It's indicative, I reckon, of the pressure that Villa are feeling right now, because you're seeing links to Nicholas Jackson, you're seeing links to Rafael Leao, and now there's inquiries going in for Mateta. I mean, it doesn't get more scattergun than this. And we talked about how Aston Villa were very upset with Ollie Watkins and obviously upset with the situation they're entering the season in. isn't this just proof? If you're shopping around for strikers with seven days to go and you're firing out inquiries left and right, who's available? Who could be the solution?
There is a kind of filter all Premier League strikers by likelihood to get out of contract here, isn't it? And there's Jackson and there's Mateta, and it's where we go next.
Yeah,
and it's,
absolutely. Yeah,
Chris Wood, maybe.
There you go, Chris Wood. Yeah. No, I don't think he's Unai's type. Then again, I genuinely wouldn't say that Mateta profiles as Emery's kind of striker. He likes someone that can stretch and run the channels. And Mateta is he's a very good player, but he's always kind of struck me as more of a, I'll lead the line and I'll have the ball to feet, please. So I'll use the word scattergun again, Dharmesh. That really feels like the right one.
Daniel, we should also touch on a signing that happened since the last Transfer Talk podcast, and that was, of course, Ezri Konsa. Deal worth £55 million from Villa to Arsenal. It felt inevitable from the moment that Arsenal expressed that interest.
Yep.
And the Jarrell Quansah link, to me, cynically, I thought was a way to maybe fish out Aston Villa to bring their price down. I could be wrong. There could have been complete, genuine interest in both, and they might well have bought Jarrell Quansah, but that's the cynic in me speaking. And as it turns out, Ezri Konsa is now an Arsenal player. Good for Arsenal, and how big a blow for Villa?
Massive for Villa. In terms of that supporter mood, I noticed a shift post-Konsa, in that until then it was all, we can see why this is happening, we can see why this is happening, this makes sense because then we do this. Konsa is the irreplaceable one in terms of quality, I think. This is a guy who had been commuting from London to Birmingham for training for years. It was a very natural move to do. And I think Sam will hopefully back me up on this, but he's a player of all of those who have left Villa this season that leaves with supporter cheer and thanks for the memories, Ezra, it was great. But boy, he leaves. Yeah, but the whole has to leave some bitterness because like what do you do now? The worst possible timing is going to the Emirates on Friday night and seeing Ezri Konsa smiling and waving at all the fans, and then watching Pau Torres on Sunday play passes into Brighton strikers in the box, and you think, yeah, maybe there's a calming influence element of this that was above and beyond Konsa's natural ability. And
what's Monday Night Football again?
Yeah,
Villa versus Arsenal.
It's such a massive hole he leaves.
Yeah,
and he does. He deserves it in that he is a consummate professional. He's a really good guy. He gave his all to Villa. There was no kicking up a fuss. There was no Ollie Watkins movement to this. But the hole he leaves is bigger.
Yeah, close to immaculate for 7 years. So where do you find that kind of consistency at centre-back? Like, it's so difficult to find.
Just finishing on Villa, I know it has been a pretty crazy summer for them, particularly with the sales, but it has been over £250 million in sales. Emi Martinez and Ollie Watkins, still big question marks over that. So that figure could go even higher. £100 million net profit. Is this a summer where maybe, however it goes this season, Villa will look back and say, this is the summer where we were able to actually move on from the position that we found ourselves in financially and move forward and rebuild?
Yeah, it's being called phase 2, basically, of Unai Emery. And the end of phase 1 was lifting the Europa League trophy, Villa's first for 30 years, which was big. And then obviously you say goodbye to so many players, and you really do, throw a stick of dynamite in there and just blow it all up. And the moves that Villa have made this summer, look at the age profile of the players being brought in, it's very clear that they're loading up for a phase 2. There's some difficult bits in the interim to negotiate. But if they get the signings right and they've made this much money over the summer, the hope is that this whole SCR UEFA financial settlement issue that's been an albatross around their necks for 2 years, the hope is that this fixes that and that they can move forward with this group of players, that they've got the scouting right. And if you give Unai Emery 3 months, he will mould an excellent team, as he always does, with some very good players. Of course, there's a lot of unknowns in that. There's a lot of change. Too much change, if we're being honest, in a short space of time. So we will see. But if Villa come out of this summer and they've left the financial issues behind them and they can just look forward to playing, Joan Manzambi and Zion Suzuki and sign, Ordonez from Club Brugge, who they're trying to sign as a replacement for Ezri Konsa, some really good young players, then again, the fans will get on side with that and they will get behind that and they'll go, okay, phase 2, let's go.
There it is. There's the positivity.
I almost smiled.
We got him.
Finally.
Almost.
Right, we spoke at the top of the show about the surprising results over the first Premier League weekend. I guess the biggest one came at Hull City, where they beat Manchester United by 2-0. On and off the ball, Manchester United, it looked pretty concerning, but Carlos Baleba on his way from Brighton, £65 million initial payment, £5 million performance-related add-ons, and worth around £70 million, probably a lot less than what they were being quoted when they were first interested in the player. What does he bring? How does he fit in? And is he the answer?
I am pleased that they have done something in this area. I'm a fan of Andre Santos, and Yuri Tielemans for 35 million is a snip. However, you have to construct your midfield properly, and you have to match the profiles together. And Tielemans has very limited athleticism, as Manchester United fans have probably just found out over the first game of the season. And what Villa and Belgium have always done is protect him with very athletic midfield partners who could not do his running for him, because that's derogatory, but matching up the profiles properly and making sure that Yuri Tielemans isn't exposed. Amadou Onana has been his foil at Villa and for Belgium. Boubacar Kamara has done the same. And Carlos Baleba profiles as that player. Athleticism, ground coverage, duels, and some good dribbling as well. I'd say an inconsistent passer, but if he's playing next to Yuri Tielemans, just pass it to him and let him do it. But I think it's a good signing. And ultimately, they've got their man 12 months on for £30 million less than they were quoted for. So I guess Man United would be coming out of this thinking that they've done pretty well.
My only concern, and it's more about everything we know more than the logic of the deal, is that Brighton are one of the best-selling clubs in the world. And they're selling the guy who was £100 million 12 months ago for £65 million, having not always had him in the team last season and quite often bring him off at half-time when he was in the team. I know there's a little bit of lingering ankle ligament damage sustained in pre-season, although that we're told that will clear up soon. My head just says red flag if Brighton are selling at a price below what we expect them to. Why? Why is that happening? This is not Brighton.
It's a year on in his contract, I would say. Obviously, that does affect things. He didn't have a good season last season. No. We're not going to pretend otherwise. But doesn't that bring his stock down a little bit? I'm just playing devil's advocate because I agree. If Brighton are selling a player, you need to ask why.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Last summer, I think the focus was on the forward line for United. And by all accounts, it was a good summer.
Mm-hmm.
They focus on the midfield this time. So if you look at their options now, Baleba, Andre Santos, Yuri Tielemans, Kobbie Mainoo, Mason Mount, Bruno Fernandez, is that combination and quality good enough to, I'm going to ask, to challenge for what, I guess, for those Champions League places again?
It's certainly enough numbers, I think, to able rotation in 4 competitions, which was, the whole thing last season was Manchester United played 40 games and this season they might play 60 odd. So that was a huge deal. I still do worry that midfield can get overrun by teams really pressing them high, turning over, being counter-attacked upon, particularly if Patrick Dorgu is kind of left high up the pitch. I just think you can create 3 versus 2 against United quite easily.
That's a structural issue, though, isn't it? Is it a tactical issue more than a personnel?
Yeah, it is. But then I think that can be over. Like that used to happen at Forest last season, but Elliot Anderson did everything. So I think there are players you can sign who can overshadow that and can counteract it. I don't think they've signed one of those players yet.
You don't think Baleba is that player?
I don't think he is. From what I've seen in the last 18 months, I don't think he's quite at that level to do that. And I also think that defensively, if all Manchester United's defenders are fit, I'm happy with it. There always seems to be at least 2 of them injured.
Well, Dharmesh just said they did attack last year, midfield this year, so they have to wait a year for defence.
And it's like the 4th row bridge. We'll start the attack again by then.
Gary Neville's actually very surprised that they haven't gone in the market for a defender. We do know that they were after a left-back. Mm-hmm. And Matthias Geisler has already joked there's no chance that Lewis Hall is going to be leaving Newcastle United for Manchester United or indeed anywhere else. But not just the left-back area. Are you surprised that they've not tried to strengthen anywhere along that back line? Because we've been using this particular stat quite often, that the back 4 that they played against Hull, had Martinez not been at the World Cup, could have been the same as the one under Erik ten Hag in his first game.
they are banking on improvement in those players, but they've been banking on that improvement for 2.5 years now. I don't think they get enough out of their fullbacks in an attacking sense, which means that the players who start wide have to stay wide high up the pitch, which means quite often the central striker gets isolated or Bruno has to do everything in central midfield. I think they need to get more out of those fullbacks. Lewis Hall would have been brilliant. United have worked this summer on if the right player isn't available, we're not going to get caught out. We've done this before where we've just gone higher and higher and higher to get the player we want, and then it hasn't worked and it's created pressure. I admire that. I have no issue with it. But it does then require a kind of double dose of patience if you think, well, we're going to wait a summer. We're not going to do a deal for doing its sake. We're not going to panic, because you're right. It's the same defence that looked exposed on set pieces on Saturday lunchtime. It still has players in it. As I say, if Yoro is guaranteed fit, if Martinez is guaranteed fit, then I think you've got enough there. But I don't think even Manchester United fans could tell you what the best combination is of players who are going to be fit regularly.
It's one of those situations where they really need to build where they can challenge for 4 or 5 years. Whereas I guess the accusation directed at Manchester United has been, let's try and win the next trophy, and then they panic and they spend and overspend, give big contracts to older players, 80 million, 85 million on the likes of Anthony, 73 million pounds on the likes of Jadon Sancho. It's good that they're going away from that, but it's going to call for patience.
It's been for too long. Manchester United was a year zero club. Like every year was year zero, and now they're saying this is a 2-year plan down the line. It's just very hard to get the biggest fan base in world football behind that as a collective. It's also very hard when the manager you have appointed he kind of sits within that structure, I guess, but it's banking on him being better than a championship manager, which we haven't seen yet in his career. There are still so many unknowns. In principle, it all sounds like it makes complete sense, but then you go and lose to Hull on the first weekend of the season, everyone loses their mind. So, yeah.
I guess, did Carrick, his overperformance and overachievement last season, has that almost given United a bit of a problem?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's difficult. It's weird to say that because they're in the Champions League and that should be fantastic for them, but no one was expecting it.
The biggest question about Manchester United's season is whether Michael Carrick, and this is incredibly derogatory about him, but whether his biggest trick last season was walking into the training ground with an "I'm not Ruben Amorim" t-shirt on and saying, "This is the strategy, guys," because it worked for 4 months, because it got so painful for so long under Amorim that everything was a breath of fresh air. Nothing of what we saw about his time at Middlesbrough really suggested that he was an elite coach. I think he's a very good person. I think he's a good manager. I think he will be a better Manchester United manager than he will be anywhere else. Whether that's the level that Manchester United should be having, like, is he the best guy for the job? I don't know, but I can also see why they had no choice but to appoint him.
Need to steer away. Not accusing you of this, but we need to steer away from like the big overreaction from 1 week, and I'm trying to do that. But I think even coming into the summer, the question mark was there over Carrick, and the best thing they did was get him to sign a 2-year deal. It didn't lock them in for 4 years, 5 years, heavy compensation, all that stuff. They just tried to keep the feel-good factor going and got him on the 2-year deal, which is you can get out of that quite nicely if you need to, and time will tell. But there are a couple of red flags for me over the last 2 weeks. One is Luke Shaw, what he said after the Hull game, which is where he was talking about how Hull are great team from set piece. It was like, Hull were bad at everything last year, mate. Like, I don't know who told you that. But
they don't have a set piece coach.
Yeah,
their fans were laughing about that comment.
I mean, that's not right. So that's either he's just on autopilot or he's been poorly prepared. And I didn't like what Yuri Tielemans said when he said that they did all ball work all summer and no fitness. I mean, you've seen the state of Premier League football these days. Everyone's 6'4" and can run marathons in a game. Like, please tell me you're doing some fitness work. So just a couple of little things that I was a bit like, oh, that doesn't sound so good. But I'm trying so hard not to dive into that pool after the first week, because frankly, about 3 of the clubs this weekend looked remotely prepared to play Premier League football. And so I'm not going to hold it against anyone off the back of a World Cup if they're not quite there.
Another player that Manchester United were interested in could probably solve the left back and the central midfield problem, 2-in-1 in Myles Lewis-Skelly from Arsenal. What was your reaction when you heard about the fact that he might have been offered to these clubs, given he'd played a major part in pre-season and a major part in the start of this season?
And started the Champions League final? quite rare that, isn't it? To get your academy product, your homegrown hero, start a Champions League final, and then potentially be up for sale a couple of months later. Dharmesh, you'll know better than me, but if someone's name is in the media linked to a transfer, someone's putting it there.
Exactly.
So I don't know what's going on here, and you can point to Mikel Arteta saying he's not for sale. Managers say stuff all the time.
Yeah.
I don't.
He did change tack last week when he says he 100% expects him to stay.
Oh,
he's
right.
confident,
Which is very different to he's not for sale, is it?
Well,
okay.
it moved on a little bit.
Okay. I mean, I'm old enough to remember Eddie Howe telling us all that Alexander Isak wasn't leaving Newcastle.
Yeah.
So, there's been millions of these scenarios, and I wouldn't take what a manager says as read in these situations.
Yeah, it would have come.
They just
from
say stuff. But there's a reason his name keeps popping up. For the life of me, I can't figure it out. Because why on earth would this be coming up? Like, Myles Lewis-Skelly is a great player, and he is a homegrown player, and the fans love him. He's clearly good enough to play for Arsenal. He could play 30 games this season, and they could win the title, and he wouldn't look out of place.
The only argument is this sort of new style, like, well, pure profit. We get to bank pure profit. And he's like, yeah, but this is the one season that you kind of don't need to do that, right?
They've got loads of money.
Yeah, they've got loads of money. What they need to keep is this kind of collective movement behind young academy players plus expensive signings that Arteta has gelled together so brilliantly. Upsetting that apple cart makes no sense, but everything we hear would suggest that the noise is coming from Arsenal's end. It's not coming from Manchester United's end. So I can't work it out.
I mean, look, they do have 2 senior left backs plus Lewis-Skelly, and they've got 6 central midfielders plus Lewis-Skelly. So from a numbers perspective, I can see it, but sacrifice somebody else, man.
Yeah. So if you look at what Arsenal's dealings have been so far, Daniel, in this window, as we consider that they've improved that defence, they've even brought another goalkeeper in. The midfield, clearly, they've improved. The left side, they wanted to get Vinicius Jr. as well as Christos Zolis. Let's see what happens in that area, because a lot of talk about Gabriel Martinelli potentially leaving. Yeah. It's that central striker chat that doesn't go away. Victor Gyökeres and Kai Havertz are the 2 incumbents at the moment. Havertz, of course, scored in the opening day of the season. Gyökeres didn't get off the bench on the opening day of the season. The Julian Alvarez saga taken another twist. He came off the bench, walked straight down the tunnel, was booed by his own fans. He wants to go to Barcelona. Atletico don't want to sell to Barcelona. They don't want to sell full stop. But Arsenal will probably be wise just in case, just to keep an eye on this situation, because it looks like it's got a little bit toxic there, doesn't it?
They'd be wise to keep an eye on the situation, but Arsenal's whole MO over the last 3 years has been, when signing players, has been, are we the number one club that this player wants to join? Like, is this guy, if you play under Mikel Arteta, you need to be 100% committed to Mikel Arteta, to Arsenal, to your teammates, to the fans, to North London forever, to whatever it is, you need to be fully in on it. And I just don't see that with Alvarez. The other complication, in a nice way for Arsenal, is that I was there on Friday night and 5 outfield players on the bench were signed last summer. So last summer's crop effectively have become the reserves now, because Havertz, Ødegaard and Saka started a league game together for the second time since December 2024. Like, everybody's fit again and everybody's happy. And oh my God, we won a title last season without Havertz being there, with Saka being at half fitness and with Ødegaard being at half fitness. It's all good news at the moment. And I just don't think there's the need, from what I saw, to take a gamble at that price on a player who has publicly said he wants to go somewhere else. He said he wants to leave, but he's also named the club, really, that he wants to go to. And that's why he was booed by Atletico fans, because he's been so blatant about Barcelona. I think Arsenal are in a position of strength where they don't need to rely on those deals anymore.
I know Havertz isn't everybody's cup of tea up front, but there is a very fair question that Daniel's raising here about effectively rocking the boat. Like, we look at Arsenal right now and we are calling them like easy title favourites.
Yeah.
Like, no one else feels close. Okay, things can change, stuff can happen. But like, out of the gate, no one expects a title race right now. Arsenal look by far the strongest team in the league. And that's with Kai Havertz up front, who is really good, for what it's worth. Really, really good. Some people don't like it, but he is. And Arteta adores him. He does everything that the manager wants him to do. So what upside are you getting from spending probably 150 million euros, maybe more, on Julian Alvarez. Well, the only upside left, the only thing to chase is a Champions League trophy, which they only missed out on penalties last year. Does he move that needle so significantly? Maybe, but my God, what a gamble to make! And could it actually have that adverse effect on everything that we already know about Arsenal? Take what we already know, take what we can see. Would it change things for the worse? Would it unbalance the squad? Obviously, Alvarez is amazing. I don't expect Arsenal to get worse by signing him, but look at them. They are primed for a title win.
Yeah.
Do you need to drop 150 million euros on a player who wants to move to Barcelona and risk upsetting all of that? I just think be very cautious.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be still more interested in addressing the left wing on a qualitative basis rather than going for that.
Yeah. Just before we go, Daniel, we just want to ask about Nottingham Forest. Oliver Glasner has said that he'll expects and hopes 2 more new signings before the end of the window. Won't give names, obviously they never do. They won't give positions unless you're the Hull City owner, which is
making our job easy.
refreshing.
Yeah, lovely.
But we can talk about it. So where do they need to strengthen?
The whole thing this summer has been, like Manchester United, has been quality over quantity and move on from deals if they're not right and wait for deals until they become right. They really want Liam Delap. I expect they will sign him before the end of the window. Whether that's a permanent, Chelsea would like a permanent deal. Forest, I suspect, would maybe like loan with obligation or even loan with option, but I think would pay the probably 40 to 45 million pounds it would take to get him in as its leading striker. Chris Wood is getting on a bit. Igor Jesus is a really industrious player, but it just doesn't score enough goals. So Liam Delap feels like their answer there. They also want a right wing back. Daniel Muniz was the one named because of the Glasner history and because everybody else seems to be leaving Crystal Palace. Why not him? Last night, the Telegraph reported that Jacob Murphy from Newcastle was also one of those options, although that strikes me as quite bizarre because he's never really played as a wing back before. But yes, they want a wing back because Ola Aina is really good, but his fitness is touch and go, and he's not really a wing back. He's more of a right back, really.
He's been a wing back for years. Come on.
Yeah,
I mean, whether or not he likes it, he's played there.
So they're the 2 positions they want. I'm surprised that they aren't going to do more in central midfield. They've got Schlager in, but obviously Anderson left a big hole. It sounds like they're going to try and change the shape of the team, obviously with Glasner's 3 at the back to do that, and maybe have Murillo stepping up into midfield when fit. But yeah, right wing back and striker seems like it.
Brilliant stuff. Do not forget, we will be back next Wednesday. That will be the day after deadline day to do a deadline day and a transfer window review. Don't forget, Sky Sports News is the best place to follow all the breaking news on transfer deadline day, with the window slamming shut. It's always slammed shut. I wonder 1 year whether it will just close without making any noise. But for now,
it won't be this year.
It won't be this year. It is slamming shut at 11 p.m. on Tuesday night, and you can follow all the developments across our digital platforms. Thank you, Sam. Fantastic again. And on debut, fantastic, Daniel. Thank you. Do come again on the Transfer Talk podcast. But the biggest thank you goes to you, wherever you've been listening and indeed watching, in your cars or on the train, in the wind or in the rain, in your house or in the shed, on your couch or in your bed. Daniel's wondering what the hell is going on here. On the hills or in the valleys. Yeah, they do it there as well. In the streets or in the alleys, out for a run or maybe a walk. Thanks for listening to Transfer Talk.
And that's for sure.